Gang, what's up? Aaron here, Canadian Looney. We're going to jump over to Power Play with Vassy and her power panel of hack experts. What a bunch of merry band of misfits. Discussing gas prices. We have a lot of challenges here in Canada, but this is going to be a liberal propaganda whitewash. Let's see the way they're going to spin it. Vassy, do your job. Let's get into it. We'll hop over here to see Vassy.
Then the cost of fuel. In Ontario, take a look at this. Gas is selling for an average of $1.67 per litre. A month ago, it was $1.25. That number is $1.79 in Quebec a month ago, $1.42. And over in BC, the most expensive gas in the entire country selling for an average of $1.93 a litre today, just $1.55 a month ago. Prime Minister Mark Carney was asked about what his government is prepared to do to address the escalating cost of fuel. Here's what he said.
Very aware of the sharp increase in gas prices. It depends, of course, as your question indicated, how long this conflict goes on.
Makes me sick to my stomach, this clown, Mark Carney.
And we are not actively engaged in the conflict. We're calling for de-escalation. We're supporting efforts to de-escalate. There's a variety of ways we can do. There's also a limit, obviously, for what we can do diplomatically to influence that.
Premiers across the country are also being asked about what's happening at the pump and if they're considering lifting, for example, fuel taxes, provincial fuel taxes where they are.
The number one way we can lower gas prices right now is to stop this war in Iran. So let's stop the war in Iran.
We're going to continue to monitor it, and if there's additional remedies that we've got to put in place for those who might be suffering extreme hardship, we've done that in the past, and we'll have to see if there's more that we can do now.
We still do have a deficit that we need to get to zero as soon as possible, and so there just simply isn't room for us to start removing hundreds of millions of dollars from our revenue line.
Let's bring in the front bench with me this evening. Former BC Premier Christy Clark. She's a senior advisor with Bennett Jones. CTV political analyst and former Conservative Industry Minister James Moore is with us. He's now a policy advisor at Edelman. Marco Mendicino is former Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Mark Carney and a former Liberal cabinet minister. He's now senior counsel and strategic advisor for Castles. And Tony Clement served in senior roles in Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper's cabinet. He's now CEO of Tony Clement International. Hi, everybody. Good to see you tonight. I'll start in the end of the country where that gas is at the highest price. Christy, I'll start with you. A lot of premiers, I noticed that every media availability that held this week, kind of getting this question about what they are prepared to do. Everyone seemed to say, well, let's wait and see how long it lasts. At what point do you feel like there will be, so much pressure on premiers that they won't be able to keep saying, let's wait and see?
I think only the premiers that are facing election are going to be ones that are able or decide to do something about it. One of the reasons I say that is because you heard the premiers talk, you heard Scott Moe talk about his deficit. He actually cares about his deficit. Alberta, British Columbia, highest deficits in Canadian history, or for each of them. And I can tell you, I was sat in opposition for a while, and we used to complain about high gas prices. There were high gas prices when I was in government for for different times too. There is very little you can do about them. Now, if you have a carbon tax, that can offer some relief by rebating a carbon tax in those provinces. But of course, provinces don't have carbon taxes anymore. It just really isn't very much that governments can do to get over this bump. I think Wab Kinew is incredibly naive to say, well, we should just stop the war. Prime Minister Carney.
He's stupid. Naive isn't the right word. He's a dummy. He's not naive.
It was quite clear. It's, we do want to de-escalate the war, but we are not in Canada in a position to end it. I'm in Tokyo today. People here are experiencing high gas prices. It's a problem all around the world, and it's caused by the fact that the Strait of Hormuz has been mostly closed by the effects as a result of the effects of this conflict. So we aren't in control of that, and I think just like other inflationary impacts that the war will definitely have, we are just going to have to find our way to stumble through this. And it's nice to see that most politicians aren't promising to try and fix this, because I think if they said that they could, I think they'd be lying.
Yeah, I think most Canadians understand, Tony, that it is out of our control, right? Because
Mark Carney would never tell a lie. Never.
Factors here are definitely the conflict in the Middle East and in particular the Strait of Hormuz. But I asked the question about timing because lots of time inflation in general is caused by things outside of domestic control. And still it gets to a point where people are, really asking for help. True, the tools are not numerous that premiers have. There are in many provinces like a provincial portion of the tax on gas, but lifting that would cost them a lot of revenue. How much of a political quagmire do you think politicians will find themselves in if this does persist?
Well, I'm old enough to have been an Ontario transportation minister when people were complaining that gas was at 52 cents a litre. Vassy, so I can tell you that even then it hurt. But listen, I think people understand what's going on in the world and how it's impacting the world price of oil and therefore the price of gasoline. I think where politicians will not be able to connect the dots is a few months from now, when all of those price hikes wend their way through the system, the lack of fertilizer getting through the Strait of Hormuz, as well increasing the cost of growing food worldwide, and all of a sudden you're going to see massive price spikes in food. And if a politician were to blame that on the war in Iran, I think there'd be a lot less sympathy for that position. So yeah, I think they can slip and slide and dodge the ball now, but I think the reckoning is coming if this conflict continues.
Do you think also, Marco, it will have an impact on sort of the focus of the country insofar as like Trump takes up so much oxygen, right? But affordability is always kind of there in the background. Does this threaten to push it to the forefront?
Totally, and that's why Prime Minister Mark Carney, when he first came in, cut taxes for the middle class. He cut the carbon tax. He reintroduced a grocery benefit. So an average family of four will get about $2,000 per year. That's cash. That's not nothing. But the real solution is to supercharge the Canadian economy and become an energy superpower, which is part of the broader vision of this government. I think it's important to really lay this out clearly for your viewers and for all Canadians, because I do get the sense we're sleepwalking a bit through this situation in the Middle East. Hormuz is it's a global artery. You got 20 million barrels of oil that flow through it every day in normal times, 20% of the world's total global supply. Iran clamped that artery totally shut. So now you've got like almost 0 barrels of oil that are flowing through that, which makes this far and away the most severe crisis when it comes to energy in generations, maybe the worst in modern history. So the result is what we see. We see oils per barrel, the price for an oil per barrel is skyrocketing over $100. And Canada, with its second largest oil reserve on the planet, it's got to be the answer. We've got to be the answer. So sure, I mean, I agree with what the Prime Minister and what the Defense Minister have said. We need to be part of the diplomatic solution. We can do some work around, I think, the margins, but we can't unilaterally stop the war. I think we'll see no one can. So what I think we need to do, just to stick with the metaphor, is we need to grow a new artery. And Canada is growing that artery by increasing production of existing facilities. It's growing that artery by fast-tracking approvals and Bill C-5, a major project.
Just grow a new artery. What? Who is supposed to believe this foolishness, this liberal propaganda bullshit?
It's like LNG2, and it's growing that artery by diversifying trade and all those missions and those agreements that the Prime Minister is racking up. So that's like the cardiovascular surgery that we need to do very quickly so that the energy market does not continue to bleed out. And I think if we do that, Vassy, then that will certainly situate the Canadian economy at a whole other level and make Canadians stronger for it.
James, I'll give you the last word, and I'll just quickly tee up. We're going to talk about the energy aspect of all of this in just a moment in our next segment. Last word to you, James.
Where was this Marco Mendocino 10 years ago when we could have used this infrastructure benefiting Canadians now? I mean, I like what you're saying, Marco, but
I wasn't elected yet. Quite.
Oh, okay.
Well, actually, just at the front end. Just at the front end.
But as we're talking, 12,000 American troops are positioning themselves up at the Gulf of, in the Strait of Hormuz right now in order to do something with regard to Karg Island. Nobody knows. Donald Trump wants allies to come in and support the mission there to sort of reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And on what parameters, we don't know. On what plan of egress, nobody knows. What exit strategy there is, no one knows. What the scope of the mission is, no one knows. So my point is, this is going to have a very long tail to it. The energy prices that people are feeling now, there's always a quick spike up in the cost. And there's a long decline over the fullness of time in order to get back. And so governments are going to experience a windfall of cash revenue with regard to this. So I think this is a pertinent question for provincial legislatures to wrestle with the glut of cash that's about to pour into provincial legislatures at a time when we now know that over 40% of Canadians, almost every second person that each of us are going to see now in the rest of our days, almost every second Canadian that we will interact with is struggling and dealing with the paycheck by paycheck reality. And they're about to get hit not only with the cost of fueling their vehicles, but the cost of their airfare, with the cost of packages to their door, the input costs from businesses entirely, restaurants, the delivering of groceries, everything is about to get hit. When energy prices are north of $112 a barrel, that's a global recessionary input. And if that stays in place for the next 3 to 6 months, that's going to have a global consequence that we're not going to find an easy way out of. So I hope this is the beginning of a broader conversation about where we're at in terms of what governments are going to do. But I think everybody's going to have to readjust their budget. Businesses are going to have to, governments are going to have to, because governments are going to get a cash inflow that's going to be immediate, but then it's going to stop. And what Mark was talking about supercharging the Canadian economy, there are no easy solutions to this. And unfortunately, we have dark days in front of us, which is why I think Prime Minister Carney, leaving some optionality on the table for Canada to be involved in terms of cleaning up the Strait of Hormuz and getting rid of those mines, which apparently are 10 to 20x the number of mines that are now in the Strait relative to what was there 10 years ago, which took 3 to 6 months to clean up. This is going to be a global energy crisis, frankly, because of the recklessness that we've seen in this foreign policy misadventure.
Okay.
All right, gang, we're going to flip back out of that panel. Those guys are a bunch of fools. I don't know. I don't feel like I learned anything from them. Anyhow, my name's Aaron, Canadian Looney. Like, share, subscribe, come and hang out for one of our live shows or check out one of our short videos. That's it. Thank you very much for watching. Not a bad job there by Vassy, but man, the legacy media is pure trash. Don't trust it. Catch you in the next video. We're out.